Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
It's been an interesting arc for us, these first parshiot of book of Bereshit, of Genesis. So kind of continuing in that vein, we're going to go through the text this morning, and as per what we've been doing recently, we're going to dig into one line of commentary and spend most of our time there. So we're going to be brief about the bigger story, I'm sorry to say, and then we're going to dig into some commentary that I feel like really spoke to me this week. So let's go to the text. We are in Parshat Vayishlach. I'm going to bring us to the end of the parsha right before Vayishlach. Vayishlach starts at 32. We're going to be at 31, at the end of 31, 51. So we're at the end of the story of Yaakov living with his cousin, with his relative Lavan. So Yaakov is leaving the house of Lavan. He's taking with him his family. So his two wives, they are two handmaidens, and he's taking his 13 children and all of his wealth that he has acquired in Haran, and they are going back to Canaan. He's going back to Abraham's place. Why did Jacob leave? Why is he with Lavan?
He was afraid.
He was afraid of his brother, because his brother
was a violent person, and he stole his forage and his birthright.
All right. So his brother, he stole the birthright from his brother twice, right? Tricked him kind of twice out of the birthright. And Esau wants revenge, as Alex pointed out. And he's a hunter. He knows how to wield things. So Rebecca overhears that Esau intends to kill Yaakov, and so she tells him to flee and to go to her family, to go to Lavan. Lavan tricks Jacob into marrying Leah when he wanted to marry Rachel, and so he worked 14 years for Rachel, and winds up with two wives. Each of them, when they're not bearing, give him their handmaids. Hence, the handmaid's tale comes from them giving Jacob their handmaids, so that they would conceive, the wives would conceive children through their handmaids, because they own the handmaids, they own the offspring of the handmaids. They can adopt those offspring as their own. So that's what's been going on since we last hung out with this family. Yes.
Question. So is Lavan, it means white. Is that just coincidental, or there's no connection?
It's like Smith. Like, did it once upon a time have a meaning, Yeah. But what, and like, we always play with that. We always make it mean something, right? But the fact that Lavan is such a yucky guy and has the name White, like, there's just not a lot to do with that. Like, if his name meant camel or something, like, I don't know, you might could do something, right? Or ass, but White, as far as I know, there's no commentary on
what about
that.
The dream?
So the dream, the latter dream?
Yeah, the latter dream.
So that's not this. That's not this. Okay. All right. So so now he's going, Yaakov is going back to Canaan. When he left, Rebecca said, "Go, and when your brother calms down, I'll send for you." It's been a really long time. It's been 20 years, right? So why didn't Rebecca send for him? Does it mean Esau never calmed down? We don't know, right? But Rebecca dies, right? And so Yaakov never sees his mother again. So he never gets word that it's okay. He never gets word that it's safe. And he goes So he's heading back anyway. So he's in a state of not knowing. He's in a state of he's got to be in some fear. And then he learns that Esav is coming with 400 men to meet him. So, but we're just going to pick up right here because I want to pick up on one line of the end of this parsha. All right. So 51, verse 51. So this is after an incident between Lavan and Yaakov, but they've worked it out, and Lavan's going to let him go in peace. So Vayomer Lavan leYaakov, and so Lavan says to Yaakov, Hine hagal hazeh v'hine hamatzeva asher yariti beini uveinecha. Sorry. So here is this mound, here is this pillar that I have sunk between me and you. Witness is this mound. Witness is the pillar that I will not cross over this mound to you, and you will not cross over this mound and this pillar to me for ill. Right? So this is a pact. This is a treaty that they're making, that neither one will come past this border to do something bad to the other one. Okay?
Or maybe just
So they construct a symbol of a boundary. Yeah. Or whatever, or they pick one. I don't know. But a matzeva is always something you put up. A matzeva you erect. A stone. Right. Well, right. So a gravestone is a kind of matzeva. Right?
But this mound is also like the
No. There's a mound and there's a matzeva. So I don't know if the mound is made or if it's already there. Okay. So they make this treaty. So may the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor keep justice between us, the God of their father. Now I want you to, this is why I picked this verse and why I want you to look at it. Vayishava Yaakov b'fachad aviv Yitzchak. So Yaakov swears. So Yaakov's going to keep his end of the agreement. What does he swear by? What does he use to swear?
his father.
The what?
Fear.
The fear of his father. What does that mean?
Good one.
Right? So my translation says the terror of his father Yitzchak. Right? So what is that about? What, just guess. There's no wrong answers. Just guess. Huh?
It's a powerful thing. It's called fear. It went down generations.
Okay. So why is it so powerful? Why is that what's associated with Yitzchak? Because of the Akedah. So what was Avraham associated with by the rabbis? Remember we did that whole text? We walked through that whole Sfat Emet text. What was Avraham associated with?
Sacrifice.
Love. Chesed, love, remember? And then we talked about maybe the Akedah, the Sfat Emet suggested, so that he would learn to relate to God out of pachad, out of yirah, out of awe and fear, right? So Abraham is associated with chesed, with love, and it's very clear as early as the biblical text, forget Hasidism, forget the rabbis, as early as the rabbinic text, pachad, yirah is associated with Yitzchak. He's defined by fear. Okay? Right. So then Yaakov slew the sacrificial meal on the mountain. That's what you do when you're making a covenant. You're cutting any kind of a deal. The way you seal the deal is that you have a power lunch. Right? So you sacrifice an animal and you have lunch. So you're dining with God so that God becomes a witness to this deal and will be brought to bear on either part. God will be, brought into whoever abrogates the deal, right? Okay. So, and they ate and they spent the night on the mountain. That's very normal biblical behavior. All right. So, Vayeshkem Lavan baboker. So Lavan gets up in the morning, kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. And Lavan went and returned to his place. Okay. So Yaakov went on his way, and messengers of God encountered him. Yaakov said when he saw them, "This is a camp of God." And he called the name of that place Machanaim, which is a plural of camp. Okay, whatever. So that's how this place got its name. Okay, whatever. So let's go on. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav. So we're in chapter 32, verse 4. Vayishlach, what does he send? Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav el Esav achiv artza seir sede Edom. So he sends messengers ahead of himself, malachim. So I'm not making it up when I tell y'all malachim does not mean angel, it means messenger, right? He's not sending angels. Malachim, it's the same. He's sending messengers. So he's sending messengers ahead of himself to Esav, his brother, towards the land of Seir, which is where Esav lives, in the territory of Edom, right? So remember we talked about Esav is Edom. And remember he comes out Admoni, red. Okay. So Edom is red. So the land of Edom, right? Okay. And he charges them. He charges the what? The Malachim, saying, when you get to Esav, I want you to say, thus says your servant Yaakov, I have been with Lavan and have tarried there till now. I've gotten a lot of good stuff, I'm really wealthy, right? And I have sent to tell my Lord to find favor in your eyes. This is what they're supposed to say to Esav, right? The messengers returned to Yaakov saying, we came to your brother Esav. He's already coming to meet you with 400 men. Okay. So what does Yaakov assume? Nothing good, says Lisa, right? Nothing good. Your brother's coming with 400 men. Now, generally, if you're just going to say hi and help somebody across the border, you don't generally take a welcoming committee of 400 men. So he's assuming, right, this could be super bad. So Yaakov, here we go. This is the verse we're going to dig into. And as always, you're going to go, why? Vayir'a Yaakov me'od vayetzer lo. So, and Yaakov became exceedingly afraid and was distressed. He divided the people that were with him and the sheep and the oxen and the camels into two camps. He said to himself, should Esav come against one camp and strike it, the camp that is left will be a remnant that escapes. Then Yaakov said, God of my father Abraham, God of my father Yitzchak, O Yud-He-Vav-He, who said to me, return to your land, to your kindred, and I will deal well with you. Too small am I for all the loyalty and faithfulness that you have shown your servant. For with my rod did I cross this Jordan, meaning only with my rod I had nothing, and now I have become two camps. Pray save me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esav, for I am in fear of him, lest he come and strike me down, mothers and children alike. But you have said, I will deal well with you. I will make your seed like the sand of this sea. What? Which is too much to count. He spent the night there that night and took a gift from what was at hand for Esav, his brother. So he takes a bunch of stuff and he hands them over to his servants, herd by herd, and says, go ahead of me and leave space between each of these herds so that each group's going to get to Esav and say, this is from your brother, your servant Jacob, right? This is going to happen over and over and over to Esav as he comes. He's going to get another and another and another herd, right? I'm come to you in peace, right? Right. Okay. And so he says all this stuff that they're supposed to say to him, right? So he arose during that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children to cross the what? The Yabok. What's his name? Yaakov. You cannot miss that in Hebrew, right? So here's the word where my cursor is in Hebrew. Yud bet kuf. Remember, the b and the v are the same letter without the dagesh. It's the same letter. So Yaakov and Yabok, it's the same letter, the b and the v. So this Yud bet kuf, that's his name, right? Just switch the kuf and the bet and add an ayin. So you cannot miss this in the Hebrew. He's going to he takes them over and he goes back over the Yabok. Yaakov goes over the Yabuk and stays by himself. Okay? He was left alone. So he gets everybody to safety. He has no idea what's about to happen. He's done everything he can to propitiate Esau and prepare it. He's split his camp in case, God forbid, one of them gets hit. He can help the other one get away. And he goes over the Yavuk alone. So, Vayivater Yaakov levado. So he's levado. He's levad. He's alone. You cannot miss this in Hebrew. Look at verse 25. So we've got the Yabuk. Now we've got Vayavik ish imo. Vayavik. Yaakov. You cannot miss that in the Hebrew. So what does that mean? So an ish, someone takes hold of him, grabs him, right? And struggles with him, wrestles with him. Ad alot shachar, until the sun is coming up. Vayar kilo yacholo. This Hebrew is translations are close, but it doesn't do the Hebrew justice. So vayar kilo yacholo, and he sees that he's not able to him. Okay. So here we go. Vayigab b'chaf yerecho. So he injures him in the socket of his thigh. Sorry, Dana. Close your ears. Vateka kaf yerech Yaakov. And he wrenches the thigh thing of Yaakov, be'avko imo, in his wrestling with him. So he dislocates or does something terrible to Yaakov's hip, to that joint. Again, sorry, Dana. Then he said, let me go, for dawn has come up. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. He said to him, what is your name? And he said, Yaakov. So until that moment, we don't know which he is who, on purpose, right? We've talked about this a lot. It's not because they didn't know how to edit texts. Right? It's all jumbled and messy and confusing because this is not a normal event. This is not a normal occurrence. Something's going on here. So it's all tangled. So once you get to Yaakov, you have to go back and read he, till you get to, right? What's going on? So what's going on is they are wrestling. He saw that he could not prevail against him. Only because we have to read backwards. If you read it backwards, now you know the Ish could not prevail against Jacob. So the Ish wrenches Jacob's hip socket. Okay?
When you say Ish, what is it?
And then the Ish says, let me go. And for dawn has come up. The sun is rising. So let me go. And Yaakov says, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And the Ish says, what is your name? And he says, Yaakov. Then he said, meaning the Ish, not as Yaakov shall your name be henceforth, but rather Yisrael. For you have wrestled with God and men and have prevailed.
The Ish is.
Correct. Then Yaakov asked and said, pray tell me your name. But he said, why now do you ask about my name? Which is not what the Hebrew says. Lama zetish al lishmi. What is this that you ask my name? Vayivarech oto sham. And he blessed him there. Yaakov called the name of the place Pniel, the face of God. Ki ra'iti Elohim panim el panim. V'tinatzel nafshi, for I saw God face to face, and my life has been spared. The sun rose on him as he crossed by Penuel, and he was limping on his thigh. Therefore, the descendants of Israel do not eat the nerve that goes here through the glutes, that is on the socket of the thigh until this day. For he had touched the socket of Yaakov's thigh it says sinew, but what do we call it? No, the ligament, right? So this ligament right here. So we don't eat that part of the animal because Jacob got hurt there. And so we don't eat that. Okay. So that's a whole nother thing about like why we don't eat the hind part, which we still don't, by the way. It's not kosher. We believe possibly it's because of the nerve. What's it called? The sciatic nerve that goes through there.
I don't know that.
Possibly in ancient times, they thought it was part of the reproductive system. And so it's like taboo to eat it.
Is that on beef or chicken or anything?
So it's on animals. So we're not allowed to eat it. All right. So possibly that's what it comes from, is they thought it was part of the reproductive system. We don't know. But you can't eat it. So,
Can't eat dark.
so he comes out. There's no dark meat on a cow. There's no dark meat on a cow.
You can eat animals with wings, dark meat, but you're saying gravity bearing.
Oh my God. Okay. So unbelievable. The things they cannot prepare you for in rabbinical school. Okay. So he walks away limping. So back to Linda's question. We don't know who the Ish is. Who does Yaakov say the Ish is? God. So in some form or fashion, Yaakov understands that he has been wrestling with God. Why does the thing say, let me go for the morning has come?
Dream.
So what is that? What does the sun rising have to do with anything?
Could be a dream.
Yeah, he's wrestling with himself in a dream, or
So if it's a dream, what is that? Why does the being say, morning's coming, let me go? You can just wake up.
Time to move ahead and live.
Before you start a new day.
Yeah. New day.
Y'all are not being nearly creative. Think outside the box. What might the origin of this story be? If the thing says, let me go, the sun is rising. Correct. It's a demon.
Oh,
Like a vampire.
It is some kind of a being that cannot exist in the daylight. It can only be in the dark. Who's heard of Three Billy Goats Gruff? That's the Three Billy Goats Gruff is a genre of stories that comes from bodies of water having demons there, or some kind of night, being that watches over it, and you have to get its permission to cross. So he's put everybody over on that side. He's gone back over the Yavuk. It is very possible Yaakov is wrestling with the demon of the Yavuk. So very early on, there's reason to believe this is something about Yaakov wrestling with the dark side of Yaakov. Right? So that there's something, right? So, but it possibly comes from that genre of stories that the river has its guardian, and that's where it originates, that that's what he's wrestling with. That's why, let me go, for the morning is coming. I got to get out of here. And Yaakov says, like Yaakov realizes what's happening, right? So he hangs on and says, not till you give me a little bit of your power, right? Give me your blessing, meaning, like, right, give me some of your stuff.
I can't resist this. It's got to be a Jewish.
Huh?
Got to be a Jewish. She's making the pun.
On what?
And Eve.
Oh, an Eve. God, okay.
what
A
compels him
Jewish.
to go back? Do we know
What compels him what?
what compels him to go back alone?
So there are some that want to suggest that it was for this purpose. It was to, like with your thing about the ladder, that he's dream incubating. That, because you remember on the ladder, he puts his head on a rock. Even in the ancient world, they weren't dumb. You don't sleep on a rock, right? Like, so that he put his head on a rock. Some people want to say that that's a dream incubation. So he's so tired, he's going to sleep, but he's not going to sleep completely because his head's on a rock. So it puts him in kind of a
Sleep state.
sleep state so he can have an experience. And there's some who want to suggest he goes back alone in order to do that.
Doctor has a boogeyman.
Yes. So that,
Kind of an evil for it.
right. So what does the author suggest the Ish is about? Certainly we know Yaakov perceives it as I have seen God face to face. What does the author seem to suggest by saying, right, that your name's not going to be Yaakov anymore, but it will now be Yisrael.
That he'll have the power to lead the.
So, I mean, it's clear that the author is also suggesting this is something about Yaakov having wrestled with something that is not human, that is right, that is of the divine, and he has hung on. And we call ourselves Bnei Yisrael, not Bnei Yaakov, not Bnei Avraham, not Bnei Yitzchak. We call ourselves Bnei Yisrael. I don't think it's an accident that this is the story of that name, right? Like
That's been passed on.
the people who called themselves Bnei Yisrael wrote this story.
And we continue to wrestle.
So so for the people who called themselves Bnei Yisrael, who called themselves Yisrael, this is their story, right? Okay. So, it's not the other way around. We often think, oh, that's why we're called Yisrael. No, the people who understood themselves as Yisrael wrote this as one of their founding narratives about how they got that name, right? So I always ask my bar bat mitzvah kids, isn't that a little odd? Like, it's not the righteous ones who follow God, the righteous who serve God. That is not how our people explain who we are. Our people explain who we are as those who wrestle God, who struggle with God.
The complexities of humans and their darkness.
But not that God is dark.
Well, that we all have light and dark. And variations, iterations.
And there it is, right? So, and there it is, right? So that's kind of, that's it. That's the end of our text that we're going to do. So I want to do what we want to do with that. And then we're going to go back to the verse about he was afraid and distressed. So this is how our people understands our name. This is how we understand who we are. Those who wrestle El. Okay. El, if you'll recall, was the chief god of the Canaanite pantheon. Most of your early Israelites, I'll say it for the millionth time, most of your early Israelites were converted Canaanites. El is a very important name for them. So for early Israel, El is a primary name. Yes, they were Yahwists. Yes, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh pushes in and becomes the dominant god, right? But El is really the way you hang on to your converted Canaanites. Right? So it's very important, this name El. So it's not Yisra Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. That's not the name of this new people in this region, right? It's a new people. This new people is Yisrael, right? So you've got a bunch of folks who have been attached to that to that history of El and El's presence and El's rituals and all of the things associated with that pantheon. You got to bring them in, and the Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh Yahwist folks, they also relate. They take that name of El on for their God as well, right? So, but Yisrael, the ones who wrestle El, who struggle with El, becomes our defining.
Is it wrestle or questioning, or they're synonymous? Those who question, those who
Struggle, it's all right. Struggle.
So, right, I think all of that is implied. I think all of it's there, like, because it's just like, because it certainly doesn't mean physical wrestling that Jacob did, right? That's obviously not what it means. It's obviously, even for them, metaphorical. So what is the wrestling? If we're not fighting with something at the edge of a river, like, what does it mean? And I think even in the biblical imagination, that was a pretty wide set of understandings about what that means. But Hannah?
If El is the object or the subject part of that name, does that verb part, do we know anything about the etymology of the Isra part?
Yes. So there are some who want to link it to wrestle, to struggle. Isar. There are some who want to tie it instead to like an officer, like an officer of God.
How about identity?
Say more.
For this identity.
So Sarah's suggesting it's a struggle for the identity of the people Israel.
Well, if Yaakov's going into himself, then that reading really makes a lot of sense.
Say more.
If you said before that you have Yaakov and Yabok, and that in a way he's not necessarily going into a river, but he's going deep into himself, and that it's an internal struggle. So that I think reinforces Sarah's interpretation.
Beautiful.
He also had a lot of struggling in his grandfather's struggle.
Okay. So this is where we're going to go. This is the reason it spoke to me, this set of commentaries. And I've just, remember I told y'all when I was going to leave the triennial that I was just going to trust that stuff would show up and that I would know what to do. And each time I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I can't teach that this week. I can't teach that this week. I can't, no. And then somehow, I don't know how it happens, but a verse that I kind of like, that's an interesting comment. And there it is again in something else I'm reading. I'm like, that for me is like, okay, then I guess that's where we're going. So where it landed for me was I want to hold on to this idea of Avraham as chesed. Zornberg suggests Avraham is chesed. That is thesis. Yitzchak is yirah, fear, which is antithesis. What is Yaakov then? Thesis, antithesis, and then what? Synthesis. Yaakov is synthesis. How do you get synthesis? You have to have thesis and you have to have antithesis struggling. They have to confront, those have to confront each other. Out of that confrontation between thesis and antithesis comes synthesis. So in that argument, Yaakov has to struggle. He has to wrestle with both the Abraham in him and the Yitzchak in him. He has got to struggle with the approach that is all love and intimacy and relationship, because look what that led to. What did Abraham's love and adoration and intimacy with God lead to? The Akedah, the willingness to sacrifice his son. So what does that communicate to Yaakov? Right? There is a very serious danger in coming just out of love and intimacy and wanting to be in relationship, a close relationship, because that led to the Akedah. But he also internalizes the life of his father, which was a life of terror, a life defined by fear and terror. He has to figure out the path that is between those. And he's not been successful.
Yeah, that's real.
And now, Alex, thank you. So why did that speak to me, right, so much? Because I feel like that's where we are. That is exactly where we are. We are struggling with the history, both of love for this land and love of the language and love of our culture and love of our people, coming out of love. And we are struggling in this moment with what is a defining, epoch for us of fear, starting with the Shoah, maybe even back to the Inquisition and all the ways in diaspora we've been terrorized. And certainly we're living through that moment now. Yeah. And as hostilities resume, can we find a path between those? If we only come out of the one, that leads to scary things, which I believe was the destruction of the Second Temple. If you come only out of the second, only out of fear, that can create horrible things too. And if we have got to find the path between those two. So I want to look at what our commentary actually, which I cannot, so it continues to amaze me. I don't know why it should shock me. Our tradition goes there. And you just have to always appreciate this about Torah. You read this verse and you go, okay, he was afraid and distressed. Move on. to the good stuff, right? So much commentary on this one verse. It never ceases to amaze me. All right. He was afraid, vayetzer, and distressed. He divided the people into two camps. Okay, that should be the end of it. Go on to the interesting part. No, not our tradition. Rashi says, because you can't have Department of Redundancy department in Torah. Torah can't be redundant. So if this is revelation and God's revelation, God doesn't waste words. So why would you have to add vayetzer and he was distressed? You've already said he was afraid. Okay. So why do you have to add distressed? So Rashi has to explain that. You have to explain why God would add that word. Okay. So Rashi says he feared greatly and was distressed. He was afraid lest he be killed. He was distressed that he might have to kill.
Especially today.
Yeah. Okay. Right? Okay. Radak also, a later commentary than Rashi, says the reason why the Torah repeated the emotions Yaakov experienced twice but in different words was to underline how strongly he felt this fear. In Bereshit Rabbah, these two expressions are described as basically meaning the same thing. So why do you need it twice, Radak says? So if there's an emphasis, what is the emphasis about? The only difference being that the former is intransitive, Yaakov being afraid of being killed, whereas the latter describes a similar fear, but that of having to kill one's adversary. One might argue that Jacob should surely not be distressed about the possibility of killing Esav, for there is an explicit rule. If someone comes to kill you, forestall it by killing him. You are allowed to kill. That's why I don't like it when they translate the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. That's wrong. That is a mistranslation. That's wrong. You are allowed to kill. You are not allowed to murder. But if someone's coming to kill your kids, if someone comes in here to hurt anybody, guess what? Like we are obligated to protect ourselves. And so what's the fear about killing the adversary? We know, according to Jewish law, you're allowed to kill someone who's coming to kill you. Nonetheless, Jacob did have qualms, fearing that in the course of the fight, he might kill some of Esav's men, who were not themselves intent on killing him, but merely on the fighting, right? And even though Esav's men were pursuing Jacob's men, and every person has the right to save the life of the pursued at the cost of the life of the pursuer, nonetheless, there is a condition. If the pursued could have saved by maiming a limb of the pursuer, but instead the rescuer killed the pursuer, the rescuer is liable to capital punishment on that account. Hence, Jacob feared that in the confusion of battle, he might kill some of Esav's men when he might have restrained them by merely inflicting injury on them. You see where our commentary is already going with this? It's already discussing the morals and ethics of warfare. It's discussing the fact that Yaakov is not only worried about being killed, he's distressed at the thought of killing somebody else, even somebody who's coming for him. But what is he concerned about in this interpretation? Killing unnecessarily. That he could just injure them, stop them from coming after him without killing them. Collateral damage.
And also, isn't it, or could it possibly be the notion of killing your own brother, even though his brother's coming for him?
For sure. And that goes, Sachs goes there. I took a lot of this from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, in his piece, Physical Fear, Moral Distress, and he says that, especially it's his brother. But I chopped that out because for my purposes that didn't work. All right. So there is, however, says Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, a second possible explanation for Jacob's fear, namely that the Midrash means what it says, no more, no less. Jacob was distressed at the possibility of being forced to kill, even if entirely justified. What we are encountering here, says Sachs, is the concept of a moral dilemma. This phrase is often used imprecisely to mean a moral problem, a difficult ethical decision, but a dilemma is not simply a conflict. There are many moral conflicts. And he goes on to say, and I chopped it out. He goes on to say, like, because there's clearly a right and a wrong. So there might be a conflict, but you choose the right over the wrong. He said, but sometimes the dilemma is when there is no right answer. It arises in cases of conflict between right and right, between wrong and wrong, where whatever we do, we are doing something that in other circumstances we ought not to do. If you don't think this applies to this morning, I don't know what to tell you. Moral dilemmas are situations in which doing the right thing is not the end of the matter. The conflict may be inherently tragic. Jacob in this parsha finds himself trapped in such a conflict. On the one hand, he ought not allow himself to be killed. On the other, he ought not kill someone else, but he must do one or the other. The fact that one principle, self-defense, overrides another, the prohibition against killing, does not mean that faced with such a choice, he is without qualms. Sometimes being moral means that one experiences distress at having to make such a choice. Doing the right thing may mean that one does not feel remorse or guilt, but one still feels regret or grief about the action that needs to be taken. A moral system which leaves room for the existence of dilemmas is one that does not attempt to eliminate the complexities of a moral life. In a conflict between two rights or two wrongs, there may be a proper way to act, the lesser of two evils or the greater of two goods, but this does not cancel out all emotional pain. A righteous individual may sometimes be one who is capable of distress, even while knowing that they have acted correctly. What the Midrash is telling us is that Judaism recognizes the existence of dilemmas. Despite the intricacy of Jewish law and its meta-halachic principles of deciding which of two duties takes priority, we may still be faced with situations this morning in which there is an ineliminable cause for distress. It was Jacob's greatness that he was capable of moral anxiety, even at the prospect of doing something entirely justified, namely defending his life at the cost of his brothers. All right. Right? Yeah. Like, I just feel like the other thing, we talk about Torah having something to say to us all the time, and it really it jumped off the pages this week as I was preparing to say, are we brave enough to start owning the complexities of this moment and to start articulating our own grief at what we are having to perpetrate? Until now, we've not, because we've been caught up in our pain, and we've been caught up in our fear, and justifiably so. But if we're really going to talk synthesis, we've got to come out of pachad. We have to come out of yirah at some point and start holding what our tradition has always held, the need to own the pain of doing even that which we know we have to do. But can we, I am asking this truly, can we as a community start to trust our ability to hold both of those and to articulate both of those?
The complexity is painful.
The complexity is deeply painful. And I don't think what I'm strengthened by in this is the ability to speak to doing that which we know has to be done and doing it with serious, serious pain and regret that it has to be done. And can we do it in a way that is the lesser of the bad and the greater of the good? And that is the moment the IDF is facing. That is the moment. And so I want to bring you this quote from Yitzhak Rabin, Zichrono Livracha, may his heroic memory be for a blessing. This is shortly after the 6 Day War. He was interviewed, and he was chief of staff during the 6 Day War. And he says, we find more and more, so this is right, this is how they're processing everything that happened, right? It's later that year. We find more and more a strange phenomenon among our fighters. Their joy is incomplete, meaning it was miraculous that Israel won that war. Completely miraculous. Their joy is incomplete. And more than a small portion of sorrow and shock prevails in their festivities. And there are those who abstain from celebration. The warriors on the front lines saw with their own eyes not only the glory of victory, but the price of victory.
Yeah.
They are comrades who fell beside them bleeding. And I know that even the terrible price which our enemies paid touched the hearts of many of our men. Now, of course, it would be men and women. It may be that the Jewish people has never learned or accustomed itself to feel the triumph of conquest and victory, and therefore we receive it with mixed feelings. Lisa?
Too, because we're told not to rejoice in the death of Egyptians because they're being surrounded.
Now remember, that's Midrash, right? That's Midrash.
But that sentiment is there.
But you read it right into Torah because that's how prevailing it is from the rabbis, right? That we shouldn't read the Torah text and rejoice, right? Because the Torah doesn't say anything about it. They sing and dance. We won. And the women dancing with their timbrels fall, right? The Midrash says, not so fast. We do not rejoice over the death of the enemy. That became Jewish culture. Biblical Israel might have celebrated if they didn't get carried off as slaves. Who could blame them? But Judaism, Jewish tradition says,
How do we get this idea out from the idea in the news?
Well, I think it has to start with us being willing to have the conversation internally. Until now, there's not been room to talk about our own feelings about what's happening to innocent Palestinians. There's not been room.
Been too concentrated on
That's right. But I'm not willing to go there. I'm not willing to call it revenge. I'm not. That I won't do. Because
why not?
Because the IDF does not understand it as revenge. The IDF understands that they have to root out Hamas.
Right.
That it was a mistake to think Israel could live in peace next to Hamas.
Yeah.
That it was a miscalculation, that they made a mistake. Yeah. And now they're going to fix it. And they're going to take out Hamas. It is not revenge. If it were revenge, they would just carpet bomb Gaza and not make corridors for people to get out and not bring food and medicine, which you don't hear in the news, into the hospital, into Shifra. They brought food and medicine into Shifra.
And they brought incubators.
And incubators and people to run them. So it's like you never hear any of that, of course. So it's not, but even if you have to root out Hamas, what's going to happen? Our innocents are going to be killed. And I'm hoping we get to a place and to a point where we can have that conversation about the pain of that, not about right or wrong, but because it may be it's wrong, right, which is what Sachs is so brilliantly bringing forward. But is there room for us to hold our deep sadness and our acute pain? That's the world we're living in, right? That's the reality that we're living in. And Daphne is saying when peace comes, we will perhaps in time be able to forgive the Arabs for killing our children, but it will be harder for us to forgive them for having forced us to kill theirs. That she's quoting Golda Meir. Yeah. When peace comes, we will perhaps in time be able to forgive the Arabs for killing our sons, but it will be harder for us to forgive them for having forced us to kill their sons. Yeah. This is the crux of what I think Sachs is reading into our parsha. I want to close with, right? It's a lot, and we could stop there. I know, but I do want to get to this Zornberg piece because I think it's such a perfect way to end. She says, "This is Jacob's dilemma. At the core, what cripples him. Remember, he walks off limping. We don't know that he ever recovers. There are some who say he walks with a limp the rest of his life. Dana and I can relate. At the core, what cripples him, and Judith can too, is his sense of his father's crippling. I think this is also really important for us. What cripples what cripples Yaakov is his father's crippling. Isaac, in the branding moment of his life, was bound hand and foot. And Jacob, in spite of all his movements of hand and feet, in spite of the freedom and energy he expresses in love and work during the years away from his father's house, remains profoundly absorbed by his father's trauma, right? I think this is us as a Jewish people. Yisrael, it's us. It's not just Jacob. We are crippled by our ancestors, the generations of Jews, cripplings. So then I gave you the thesis, antithesis, all that stuff. The nodal experience is, Ramban asserts, the Akedah day, the existential dread that he lived on that day, he was bound in sacrifice to God. As Jacob begins his journey down to Egypt, he has agonized premonitions of the exile and slavery of his children. She's now talking about the end of the Jacob story, the end of the Joseph story, when he goes down to Egypt to live. She says that's where he finally brings it all together, is when he goes to live with Joseph. He has a vision at the end of his life of the exile and slavery of his children. He offers sacrifices, the Shlamim sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac, who was known in dread and blind anguish. He engages fully with that dread and prays that it may be moderated in him, that he may find a new vital equilibrium. Jacob is the first person to offer such peace offerings in the Torah. He's the first to offer a shlamim, a peace, a wholeness offering, expressing his longing for peace, for wholeness. But in order to realize that desire, he must begin with the difficult, the overwhelming experience of his immediate precursor, his father. He must, in Bloom's terms, compound with Isaac's reality, meaning really face that it was his father's trauma that he's carrying around, right? We, the Jewish generation of today, still act out of so much past trauma. We had this conversation a few weeks ago, right? Only then can he seek to balance the fear, the sense of mystery and complexity in which the human is dwarfed, with the opposing sense of chesed, of love, connection, spontaneous expansion, and encounter with all that exists, which is, of course, his grandfather. This search for equilibrium, for a sense of his own quickening power, that's Bloom's stuff, Ramban calls the search for truth. It is consummated through sacrifice, through peace offerings, which generate a new revelation of God in a vision by night, a revelation of modified dread, irradiated by hope and promise.
Amen.
I believe this is our charge. This is our moment. This is exactly what is demanded of us right now. We are not denying the trauma of the past. We are not denying the realities of the vulnerability of our people, of the Israeli people. We are not asked to deny that. I think it's exactly this, that it is a revelation, this night, this vision of God at night that Yaakov has. It's a revelation of modified dread, irradiated by hope and promise. This is the only way that we will take our ability to live in the world as synthesis, as a way of contributing to the world through our own confrontation with both the mystery and the expansion of chesed and ahava, which has characterized the Jewish people, as well as an honest assessment and an honest facing of the trauma of the past and what that means, bringing those together in order to go forward, both in Israel and with what we face in America, with all that's happening. And so I bring that to you because it really, really resonated for me that it is, and no one is saying it's easy, and no one's saying it's clear how to do this, and no one's saying we should know how to do this. But our tradition has never stopped because it was hard. Our tradition has never said because we don't know how, we don't try. Our tradition has said, figure it out. You have lots of wisdom to pull from, and there are lots of smart people living today. Use it. Dig in. You don't get to not start the work just because you know you can't finish it. You don't get to not start. And so that is what I offer us all is may we have the energy, the courage, the strength, the determination to be the synthesis that our people and the world needs right now. Shabbat Shalom.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.